Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Keena. Today's Big Pharma versus Nature challenge is going to be based on an issue that affects millions of Americans every single day, and that's heartburn and indigestion. So today's contenders are going to be Tagamet, which is cimetidine, and Tums, which is calcium carbonate, with an honorable mention for Pepto Bismol, which I just don't have on hand, which is bismuth subsalicylate. And the reason I say honorable mention is just because it's very similar to another herb that we're going to be talking about today, and they all try to do about the same thing. So first, we'll start with the Tagamet. It is supposed to be an acid reducer, so it's kind of I think they also have like Pepsid and all those other OTC medications. That's what this one is supposed to do. And then we have Tums, which I think everybody is super familiar with, because you can have them, in your purse, and people give them to kids, and you say you have a tummy ache or whatever. But it's a little bit more, it's an antacid, but I think people take it for other issues like nausea and things like that. So these are the two that we will be directly comparing today. So as I said before, Tums is calcium carbonate, and basically any of these carbonate medications are trying to mimic a bicarbonate substance that is released naturally by the pancreas when we're trying to digest, and it keeps everything under control and balanced. So when we take these types of antacids, they are trying to basically do what the body normally should be doing on its own, but it's not for some reason in this instance, so we take these type of medications. But my issue with things like Tums is that it is something that you can't necessarily take with other medications. You have to keep about a 1 to 2 hour buffer between the time you take the Tums or calcium bicarbonate with the other times that you're going to take your other medications, because it can decrease their effectiveness or make them ineffective altogether. So that is an issue that if you take other medications, you want to take into account when you're thinking about taking Tums. It also is contraindicated, and that's just a big word for clashes or doesn't go with or something like that. And it's contraindicated with drugs like Lanoxin, what is the other one? Didronal, Dilantin, things like that. So even outside of the fact that any medication needs to be taken, 1 to 2 hours outside of taking this, there are specific medications that can't be taken at all, or it really should be done under a doctor's supervision. So you want to keep that in mind. Also, there's just additives. There's so many gums and preservatives. I mean, the first ingredient in the inactive ingredients is, I don't know what that is, acacia gum and alcohol, ammonium hydroxide, beeswax. Like, there's so many things in here that they put to help it taste better. Like, this is supposed to be mixed berry, and that's why it has so many artificial ingredients. So never mind any issues you may have with the actual calcium bicarbonate. What about the issues you may have with all the additives and colorings and things of that nature? So that's something to keep in mind when you're considering Tums. The next one is the Tagamet. Like I said, this one is cimetidine, and it has a few extra inactive ingredients that you may not want. There's like cornstarch, let's see, cellulose, sodium starch glycolate, sodium lauryl sulfate, which is really interesting that that's in here, because I know some people don't even like that on their hair, or that may be sodium lauryl sulfate, I'm not sure, but there's a ton of additives in this one as well. Now, what's interesting about the Tagamet is that it can be contraindicated. Like I said, that just means goes against or doesn't work well with blood thinners. So if that is something that you're on because you have a clotting issue, or for whatever reason your doctor has you on anticoagulants, you got to be careful taking this kind of medication, because it's contraindicated with these types of medications. So that would be like your warfarins and things like that. Also, antidepressants, and there's like a long list of antidepressants that cimetidine is not compatible with or contraindicated with. So, you know, when we have a stomach ache because we have heartburn or indigestion for whatever reason, you're thinking about just grabbing something quite quickly. You're not thinking, well, do I have to check with my doctor first, or is this safe for me to take? You usually just take some Pepto Bismol or pop one of these or chew a Tums. And that's something that you really have to keep in mind if you are on different types of medication, that you can't just take anything because you just don't know possibly what's all in it. Also, it does have some side effects, and as well as the Tums. Both the Tums and the Tagamet have side effects that are like headache and nausea, sometimes vomiting, stomachache, diarrhea, which seems counterproductive, right? You took this because you were feeling nauseous, or you had stomach cramps or gas or things like that, and it's just making it worse. So like I said, these are the things to keep in mind. I specifically want to speak about the Tagamet, that you should take caution with taking something like this, like I said, which is cimetidine, if you have HIV, AIDS, kidney or liver disease as well, because it can have some issues with those diseases as well. So you always want to talk to your doctor before taking it. But as I said before, when you have a stomach ache that is acute, meaning it's just happening right now, it's not something you deal with every day, you don't want to call the doctor before you can get it fixed. So that's why we're going to be looking at the natural alternatives, because you want to be able to take some things that don't require you to be kind of checked off by somebody to make, you know, to approve that you can take it with whatever other medications you're taking. You want to feel confident and safe that you can feel better soon without having to worry about kind of jumping through hoops to get there. And as I said, we'd be giving an honorable mention to Pepto Bismol, which is another one that is regarded as relatively safe, because we give it to children and we take it ourselves, and it's probably one of the earliest memories you have of your mom or dad giving you medication because you had a tummy ache. So, but it's still an honorable mention because in severe cases of side effects with Pepto Bismol, which I said is bismuth subsalicylate, is ringing of the ears. So that would be a severe response. That wouldn't be normal. Most of us have taken it since we were a kid and we never had any issues, but you do want to take that into consideration. Also, the Pepto Bismol or bismuth subsalicylate is not a medication that you should take within 1 to 2 hours of antibiotics. It can render them ineffective, or you can just have an uncomfortable response. And sometimes when we have some type of bug that is affecting our stomach, or the medication itself makes us a little nauseous, you run to something like a Pepto Bismol, not realizing that actually that medication can stop your antibiotics themselves from working, or at the very least decrease their effectiveness. So that is something to take into consideration. But as I said, most of us have been taking it since we were a kid, and it's considered relatively safe. But I did want to add it to the conversation, because when you talk about upset stomach, diarrhea, indigestion, all those things, I think everybody thinks about the pink stuff. And speaking of pink, that is another thing. I mean, that's artificial color, additives, stabilizers, things like that that you may not want in your diet. So that's something that you might want to consider as well when you're deciding if you should take that medication versus another medication, or natural remedies. Okay, so on the nature side of the ring, I'm going to introduce you guys to 2 herbs today that are really helpful for nausea, indigestion, diarrhea, heartburn, things of that nature, and they are Nettle Sweet and Anise. All right, so Nettle Sweet. You can't really see it. This one is another one that's made of the plant's tops. It is the leaves and stems and flowers. So you can't really see that. But it's another one that smells a little bit like just tea, you know, plain old tea that you're used to drinking. And this is herbs that are dry, and that is stems and leaves and flower tops. So Nettle Sweet is a plant that is antacid, it's anti-inflammatory, it can be diuretic, but it also can be astringent, which seems a little bit counterintuitive. So astringent kind of means to dry up in a sense, which is why it helps with diarrhea. And diuretic actually makes you eliminate, so it would also make you go to the restroom quite a bit. So it's interesting when a plant has both of those properties, and we don't quite understand how the plant knows in the person when it should do one or the other thing, but somehow the plant's constituents do somehow know what they should do for the person at the time. So with Nettle Sweet, it is a plant that has a constituent called salicylate, which, if you remember, we were talking about Pepto Bismol, which is bismuth subsalicylate, and that is why those are very similar. Nettle Sweet is an all-around stomach and digestive aid. The same way when we talk about the commercials on Pepto Bismol, and it's like, upset stomach, diarrhea, nausea. It lists all these things that it helps with because it's kind of an all-around digestive aid. That is exactly the same thing with Nettle Sweet. So it's really awesome to have. It is leaves or the flower tops. So that can include flowers. So we would take this in an infusion, as we talked about before, which just means tea. And you would pour this 1 to 2 teaspoons over with a cup of water, hot water, and you would just steep it like your tea. So you're talking about 10 to 20 minutes of steeping. And then I wouldn't maybe gulp down the whole cup just because your stomach is probably uncomfortable. It may be feeling a little full, but about a half a cup every 2 hours until you feel complete relief is really what you want to strive for with Nettle Sweet. Now, there really aren't any side effects or contraindications for Nettle Sweet like they are with the other medications. However, like I said, it is a salicylate based plant. That's what's naturally occurring there, and that is the same thing as what is in an aspirin. So if you have an aspirin allergy or sensitivity that you've ever known about, then you would not want to take Nettle Sweet or any other salicylate kind of based medication, which you likely already know because you've taken an aspirin before and you had an adverse effect and you don't take them anymore. But if you've ever felt yourself being uncomfortable or you may be sensitive or allergic, we want to steer clear, unfortunately, of the Nettle Sweet because of those salicylates. Okay, so our next plant is going to be anise, and most people use the seeds for things, or these little stars, and that is exactly what you would be using for the herbal remedy. The seeds themselves are what have the therapeutic ability. So we would be using these. You would just crush them slightly to kind of release the volatile oils, and then you'd make the same type of infusion. So you'd pour hot water over it, and then you'd have it for 10 to 20 minutes steeping, and then you go ahead and drink that. You can do that up to 3 times a day as well, and you'd make a cup at a time. Anise is a big winner for moms because it is really great for babies and infants. It is indicated for colic, nausea, and indigestion. So it's really safe, and that's why moms really enjoy taking this, even when they're pregnant, but especially for the little ones, because a lot of times there is a lot of controversy or misunderstanding about what can be given to children and infants from an herbal perspective. So that's why moms really love anise, and you really don't have a ton of issues with anise unless you take more than maybe what you take in standard cooking. If you go above that, some people have kind of a photosensitive response where it makes them uncomfortable in sunlight after they've taken it, or they just have like an allergic response. But that is, like I said, in high doses, which you would not be taking if you're just crushing up a few leaves for tea. You're looking at a few seeds for tea, and you'd be doing that in like 1 to 2 teaspoon increments. So you're pretty safe from that perspective. Now, it is contraindicated in pregnancy, but typically only in higher doses. But I still would check with my OB just to ask, what their perspective on it is. But it is relatively safe. It's just something that you may want to consider if you are pregnant. Now, the thing that people love, like I said, about anise is about the fact that, it helps little children. That means it's carminative, which just means it helps the body expel gas. But a lot of times when you have indigestion or even heartburn, you have that big bloating of the stomach, and that's extremely uncomfortable. So that's why we really love anise. It's also antiemetic and it's all around digestive. So you have that nausea, it's gonna wipe it out. You have that griping in the stomach and you having those cramps, all around good option. You can take this one in tincture form or tea, as I said before. And remember, a tincture means you use alcohol and typically water, because we're not using 100% alcohol unless we're doing like a cannabis or something like that. And even that's about 90% alcohol. So for the anise itself, we're going to use 40% alcohol. So just make sure, you're using 60% water, 40% alcohol, like any grain alcohol, corn alcohol, things like that. And you just pour that over. Usually in a 1:5 ratio is what I like to do, and you let your tincture sit for 30 days, as we talked about before, and that'll be ready for you whenever. Now, a tincture I would not give to children necessarily. It's small increments of alcohol, but it's still alcohol, so you may want to look into making your tincture with a fruit vinegar, like apple cider vinegar, if you know for sure you're going to be giving that to the littles, or just make the infusion tea as we talked about. What else did antimicrobial. Anise is antimicrobial, which I find really interesting when we talk about the fact that the Pepto Bismol can reduce the efficacy of your antibiotics. And it's like, well, I need to take both. In certain situations, you may need to take both, which is why I love the idea of combining these two herbs, the Nettle Sweet and the anise, because, well, one, the Nettle Sweet is not gonna stop your medications from working, but if you want to take them together, now you have that antimicrobial action as well as the stomach issues. And a lot of time we have dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of the bacteria flora in our gut. So think about the fact that we have this issue, especially if it's recurring. Maybe you have it multiple times a week, this discomfort, this heartburn, this indigestion. Well, it may be dysbiosis. And just as a extra, the anise is going to be antimicrobial in the gut, which not only is going to kill off the bad bacteria in your stomach, but it's also going to help the good bacteria flourish, especially if you're going to be taking like a probiotic or something like that. So those two together are really great for long-term use, but obviously for the acute use as well. All right, so I think I'm gonna have to start making this a little bit harder for myself, especially because I want it to be fair. But in this big pharma versus nature, I don't know what you guys think, but I believe that nature wins again. We're talking about little to no side effects again. We're talking about, ailments and issues that these type of medications are striving to really mimic in what already is in nature. Nettle Sweet and anise are very easy to get. Now, Nettle Sweet more so in like an herbal store or online or an herbal section of kind of a natural store. But anise you can get in the grocery store in the spice section. Usually it'll come in the little stars, or maybe it'll already come as just the seeds, but it's really easy to get, and it's less expensive and longer lasting, I would say, than having like these type of things on hand, which we typically do have. Now, what I will give to the pharmaceuticals is convenience, and that's what we typically love as humans. Convenience, right? It's like I can keep this in my purse and I can pop it really quickly, and hopefully I feel better. Everybody's not at home able to steep some tea or something like that, which is why I love the idea of tinctures. Tinctures are fast acting, and once you make it, you can put them in little 1 ounce, glass dropper jars. And then you can take that, that can fit in your purse as well. And then you can take those drops sublingually, which we talked about means under the tongue. And now you have something just as efficient and convenient as your over-the-counter medications, without any of the side effects, contraindications, cautions that you have to decide to talk about with your doctor, and you still get the effects of them. So I really would advise that you consider, making your own tinctures if fast acting is really something that you desire. So other than that, that's it for today. Like I said, I have to make this a little bit harder on myself. I really want to be able to have a deeper contrast and maybe have it be a little bit more of a competition between the big pharma medications versus the natural remedies. So leave me some comments below. Let me know other medications maybe that you take on a daily basis and that you were like, I'd love to learn about a natural alternative if there's one, or a complementary natural medication that I can take with this, maybe to fill in those gaps that maybe the pharmaceutical medication is not filling. So let me know. I will talk to y'all soon, and as usual, I have to get back to work. I hope y'all have a good day. Bye.